My name is Claire Winslow. I am 32 years old, and until last Christmas, I believed being dependable was the same as being loved. 2 days before I was supposed to fly home, my younger sister sent a message to our family group chat saying our parents could not afford Christmas that year. No dinner, no gifts, no gathering. She made it sound final, and my parents did nothing to correct her. I canceled my flight, accepted the lost fee, and told them I understood. On Christmas night, I sat alone in my Denver apartment eating reheated casserole while holiday music played quietly from my laptop. Then, an Instagram notification appeared on my screen. My sister was live. I almost ignored it, but something made me tap. The video opened inside my parents' living room. Champagne glasses were raised beneath professional lights. Relatives, family friends, and people who had told me they were staying home were laughing beside a decorated tree. My sister turned the camera toward the crowd and called them the real Christmas crew. Nobody asked where I was. Nobody looked uncomfortable. The next morning, my father finally contacted me, but not to explain or apologize. He wanted $2,000 for January rent, and he expected it by the following day. I read the message twice, opened my banking app, and canceled every payment connected to them. Then I wrote, "Stay out of my life. All of you." Blocked their numbers, and went to sleep. At 7:03 the next morning, my intercom started buzzing. My father, my mother, and my sister had driven through the night and were standing outside my building, crying and demanding that I open the door. Before I tell you why they were so desperate to get inside, tell me where you are and what the weather is like there. I want to see how far this story can travel. I did not open the door. I stood several feet away while the intercom kept buzzing, listening as 3 people who had ignored me on Christmas suddenly acted as if reaching me was an emergency. To understand why they drove more than 7 hours through the night, you need to understand the role I had played in my family for years. My younger sister was Paige. She was 27 and called herself a lifestyle creator, although most of her income came from occasional sponsored posts, boutique promotions, and small event collaborations. Online, she appeared to live a polished life filled with restaurants, designer bags, trips, and spotless seasonal rooms. In reality, she spent most of what she earned maintaining the appearance that she was more successful than she was. Our father, Martin, sold recreational vehicles on commission. Some months were good, but he treated every strong month as proof the next would be better. Our mother, Teresa, worked part-time in an elementary school office. She avoided conflict so completely that she usually allowed the loudest person to decide everything, then called it keeping the peace. They rented a split-level house in Papillion, outside Omaha. After selling their old home to settle debts, they promised the rental would be temporary. 3 years later, they were still there, and I was quietly covering part of the cost. It had not begun as a permanent arrangement. One winter, Dad was short on rent because 2 sales fell through, so I sent him $800. A few months later, Mom had an insurance deductible she could not cover. Then their car needed repairs. Then the phone plan increased. Every request sounded temporary and came with a promise that things would improve next month. Eventually, helping became routine. I paid $420 monthly toward Paige's car because she insisted she needed an impressive vehicle when meeting brands. I kept the family phone plan in my name because it was cheaper. I also gave Mom a low-limit card for groceries and emergencies. The rule was simple. It could be used for food, medicine, or a genuine household problem. I never expected praise. I believed that if I had more stability, helping was what a good daughter and sister should do. My work made it possible. As an independent cybersecurity compliance consultant, I reviewed financial systems for banks, medical companies, and insurers. My income was strong, but I worked long hours, kept detailed records, and spent my life ensuring people could not misuse access to sensitive accounts. Somehow, I never applied the same caution to my family. Christmas was the one time I convinced myself the arrangement was worth it. Our gatherings were noisy and ordinary in the best way. Football played while someone checked the turkey. Cheap gifts arrived in Amazon boxes. People wore ugly sweaters and argued about mashed potatoes. For a few hours, I was not responsible for solving every financial problem. I was simply a daughter coming home. That year, I booked my flight from Denver to Omaha weeks early. I bought Dad a heated jacket, ordered Mom a new stand mixer, and found Paige a portable lighting kit she had mentioned. I also scheduled a $2,000 transfer for December 27th to help cover January rent. Around the same time, Paige began hinting about her biggest holiday collaboration yet. Whenever I asked what she was planning, she changed the subject. During Thanksgiving, I suggested she stop financing expensive content before receiving sponsor payments. She rolled her eyes and said I did not understand personal branding. I told her branding was not worth going into debt. After that, she barely spoke to me. Still, when her voice message appeared 2 days before Christmas, I did not connect it to our disagreement. Paige said Mom and Dad could not afford to host anyone, so Christmas was canceled. Mom responded with a heart emoji. Dad said nothing. I believed them because I had trained myself to believe that whenever my family struggled, my job was to understand. I replied that I was sorry things were difficult, and asked whether I should still fly in for a quiet visit. Paige answered immediately. She said Mom and Dad were exhausted and needed the house to themselves. I offered to bring dinner or stay at a hotel. She said that would only make them feel guilty. Mom privately messaged that it was simply a hard year and we would celebrate another time. Her words sounded warm but did not answer whether they wanted to see me. Dad never replied. I canceled the flight and lost part of the fare. I told myself complaining would be selfish while my parents were supposedly worried about rent. On Christmas Eve, I wished several relatives a happy holiday. Most sent generic replies. My cousin Evan said he was busy with family and would call later. I assumed he meant his wife's family. Looking back, several responses were strangely careful, but I was not searching for a lie yet. On Christmas Day, I slept late, answered emails, and video called 2 friends visiting relatives elsewhere. One invited me to join her family's dinner over Zoom. I declined because I did not want to explain why my own family had canceled on me. By evening, the silence felt heavier. I heated leftover casserole, poured sparkling water into a wine glass, and turned on a holiday movie. At 8:42, my phone notified me that Paige had started a live stream. I almost dismissed it. Then I remembered that she had claimed our parents needed a quiet night, and curiosity won. The video opened with music, laughter, and white and gold decorations. For one confused second, I thought she was at a hotel. Then the camera shifted, and I recognized my parents' stone fireplace. The house was packed. A large tree stood beside the stairs. Professional lights faced a photo backdrop. Champagne bottles rested in silver tubs near the kitchen. At least 25 people moved through the rooms wearing coordinated sweaters. I saw aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, and family friends. I saw people who had replied as though they were spending Christmas quietly at home. I saw Evan carrying a plate. Most painfully, I saw my parents smiling beneath the staircase while Paige filmed them. They did not look financially devastated. They looked delighted. Paige raised her glass and announced that the real Christmas crew had arrived. People cheered. Someone asked where I was. Paige laughed and said I did not enjoy fun events like this. Dad looked toward the camera but did not correct her. Mom lowered her eyes briefly, then smiled again when Paige moved closer. That small movement hurt more than the laughter. It proved she knew. The party had not been arranged at the last minute. A printed sign displayed the name of a local event company. Branded bottles from a regional beverage company were arranged for the camera. Paige thanked a boutique for providing outfits and mentioned that a holiday video would be posted the next day. This had been planned for weeks. They had not canceled Christmas because they lacked money. They had canceled my invitation. I kept watching. Paige showed the dining table, catered appetizers, and gifts beneath the tree. She called it a family holiday experience, eliminating any claim it was only business. I did not comment or call. I recorded the live stream. My work had trained me to document before reacting. As Paige moved through the room, I noticed the event company's name again. It looked familiar. I opened my banking app and checked the card I had given Mom. A pending charge for $1,784 appeared under that company. Another charge of more than $600 came from a beverage distributor. The card intended for groceries and emergencies had helped finance the party they said they could not afford. Something colder than anger settled over me. I saved the statements and live stream in a folder. I wanted to believe the card had been used accidentally or that Paige intended to repay it. Then, at 9 the next morning, Dad sent a message. No greeting, no question about my Christmas, and no acknowledgement of the party. He wrote, "Need the $2,000 for January rent by tomorrow. Do not make us chase you for it." They had used my money to exclude me, lied, celebrated publicly, and still expected me to pay their rent. I opened the scheduled transfer and pressed cancel. Canceling the rent transfer took seconds. Ending the rest of the arrangement took most of the evening. First, I replied to Dad. I wrote, "You canceled me, not Christmas. Stay out of my life. All of you." Then I blocked him, Mom, and Paige. I did not threaten them or post the live stream. I removed my money and access from lives in which I had become a payment method. I locked the emergency card before another charge appeared. I removed my bank account from Paige's automatic car payment. I arranged for the family phone lines to separate in 30 days, giving everyone time to open individual accounts. The internet at my parents' rental was still under my name, so I notified the provider that I would no longer be responsible after 10 days. I did the same with 2 household services. I did not order anything shut off immediately. I gave legal notice and enough time for them to assume responsibility. Finally, I changed every password, security question, and recovery code connected to accounts they might recognize. Around 10:30, the consequences reached them. The event company attempted to process the remaining party balance, and the emergency card was declined. Paige learned the payment source for her next car installment had been removed. Dad realized the rent transfer was gone. They called from blocked numbers, private numbers, and Paige's business account. I ignored them. Emails followed. Mom claimed there had been a misunderstanding. Paige said the party was sponsored and had cost almost nothing, though my statement proved otherwise. Dad wrote one sentence, "Call me now before you make this worse." I turned off notifications and slept. I expected anger in the morning. I did not expect them to drive to Denver. At 7:03, the intercom began buzzing so aggressively that I thought there was an emergency. Dad stood closest to the entrance. Mom was behind him with both hands against her face. Paige wore the same coat from her Christmas stories, with makeup smeared beneath her eyes. They had left Nebraska near midnight and driven through the night. I answered without unlocking the door. Dad demanded entry. I asked why they were there. He said I had frozen Mom's card, interfered with Paige's car, canceled their rent money, and created panic over one party. He spoke as though my own financial decisions were criminal. Mom moved toward the speaker and said they loved me. She claimed nobody meant to hurt me. Paige interrupted and said the live stream had been for work. She insisted I would have complained about the cameras and made sponsors uncomfortable. I asked why they said Christmas was canceled instead of explaining there was a business event. Paige said it was complicated. I asked why almost every relative attended. She said they needed people in the background. I asked why she called them the real Christmas crew. She cried louder and accused me of twisting her words. Dad told me to stop interrogating her and open the door. I remained still. Then I asked the question none of them wanted to answer. If this was only a misunderstanding, why did all three of you know I was eating Christmas dinner alone? The intercom went silent. Mom looked down. Paige glanced at Dad. He avoided the question and said January rent was due soon. That answer clarified everything. They had not driven through the night because they were ashamed or afraid of losing me. They came because the money was gone. I told them every voluntary payment had ended. The phone and internet would remain active long enough for transfer. All necessary communication had to be sent by email. Dad struck the outside door with his palm and accused me of punishing innocent people because my feelings were hurt. I said I was allowing 3 adults to pay their own bills. He said family did not abandon family during financial trouble. I reminded him that family had abandoned me on Christmas. He called me cruel. I answered that cruelty was using someone's money while planning a celebration that excluded her. Paige began recording on her phone, probably hoping I would say something useful online. I stopped speaking. When they continued buzzing other apartments, building security came downstairs. The guard ordered them to leave. Dad argued until the guard threatened to call police for trespassing. Finally, they returned to their car. Less than an hour later, Paige posted a story saying an unnamed relative was using money to control people who loved her. She did not mention the canceled Christmas message, livestream, or card charges. That afternoon, Evan contacted me. He said he had just learned I was told the celebration had been canceled. He apologized for assuming I had chosen not to attend. Then he wrote, "Paige planned this weeks ago. I think you need to see the group chat." Evan sent 17 screenshots from a private group Paige had created in early December. It included my parents, several cousins, 2 aunts, and people helping with the event. Paige described the party as both a family Christmas and a holiday content opportunity. She asked everyone to wear neutral colors, arrive before 7, and avoid posting publicly before her live stream. A week later, someone asked whether I was flying in. Paige answered that I would not be invited because I always questioned her spending and would ruin the energy. Mom replied that excluding me seemed harsh. Dad wrote that I would get over it because I always did. That sentence stayed on my screen. It showed that hurting me was not accidental. They had discussed it, predicted my reaction, and decided my forgiveness was guaranteed. Another screenshot showed Paige asking whether she could use Mom's emergency card to secure the event company. She promised to replace the money after her sponsor paid. Dad replied that it should be fine because I was already sending January rent. They treated my account like a bridge between the life Paige wanted to display and money she did not possess. Evan apologized repeatedly. Paige had told everyone I was too busy and had agreed to skip the holiday. He believed her because I traveled for work and sometimes missed events. I told him I did not blame him for trusting a lie supported by my parents. I saved every screenshot with dates and senders visible, adding them to the card statements, Dad's demand, and live stream recording. The evidence made me calmer. I no longer wondered whether I had misunderstood. The truth was organized in front of me. Paige responded to my silence by intensifying her public campaign. She posted quotes about financial abuse and controlling relatives. She filmed a video saying some people offered help only so they could withdraw it when they did not receive enough attention. Her followers did not know she meant me, but relatives did. Mom emailed that Paige was under pressure and had made one bad decision. She asked me not to destroy my sister's future over a misunderstanding. Dad accused me of being overly sensitive since childhood. He said they excluded me because Paige needed one event without criticism. He still did not acknowledge the lie or card use. Instead, he wrote that success had made me arrogant and that a truly generous person would not keep records of what she gave. I kept records because I worked in compliance, but record-keeping was not the betrayal. Spending another person's money while hiding the truth was. 2 days later, my Aunt Patrice called from an unfamiliar number. She said my parents were exhausted. Paige was humiliated. And I was damaging the family because I could not forgive one missed dinner. I asked whether she knew I had been told the celebration was canceled. She said Paige claimed I had declined the invitation. I asked whether she knew my emergency card paid thousands toward the party. She became quiet. I asked whether she knew Dad demanded rent money the next morning. She admitted she did not. I sent 3 screenshots, including Dad's statement that I would get over it. Patrice called an hour later sounding different. She apologized for judging me without asking what happened. She also confirmed that Paige had described herself as the person financing the event when thanking guests. I scheduled a meeting with Maya Chen, an attorney who had helped me during a previous contract dispute. I was not interested in suing my family for every dollar I voluntarily gave. I wanted to secure my accounts and determine whether the card charges crossed a legal line. Maya reviewed the card agreement, my written explanation of its permitted use, and the screenshots showing Paige's intent. She advised me to keep communication in writing and avoid responding publicly. She explained that I had every right to stop voluntary support, but I should separate those payments from unauthorized expenses. She recommended a formal demand for repayment of the event charges, not as revenge, but to establish that the card was not an unlimited family account. When the charges settled, the party total reached $3,460. It covered the photo wall, lighting, furniture, setup, champagne, and promotional supplies. Paige had used an emergency card to finance the image of a celebration my parents supposedly could not afford. Meanwhile, consequences began. Paige missed the final payment deadline for the event company. Instead of negotiating privately, she accused them online of exploiting a small creator. The owner responded with records showing Paige had approved the charges. One sponsor saw the dispute and suspended an upcoming campaign. Paige's car lender reminded her that the next installment needed a new payment source. My parents opened separate phone and internet accounts and discovered the actual cost was much higher than the amount I had covered. None of this happened because I attacked them. It happened because the bills had always existed, and I was no longer standing between the bills and the people responsible. I intended to handle everything from Denver until I remembered several important documents remained at my parents' house. My birth certificate, tax records, family photographs, and my grandmother's wooden recipe box were stored in the guest room. I did not want them used as leverage. I emailed that I would arrive Saturday afternoon to collect my property, and that Evan would accompany me. Dad replied that I was behaving like a stranger. I answered that strangers usually received more honesty than I had. The drive from Denver to Papillion gave me too much time to reconsider. Part of me hoped that seeing my parents would produce a sincere explanation. Another part knew that hope was the weakness they had relied on for years. Evan met me outside Omaha and followed me to the house. I wanted a witness, not because I expected danger. The Christmas lights were still attached to the roof, but several sections were dead. The party backdrop had been folded against the garage wall. Boxes blocked one side of the driveway. The house that looked flawless online now appeared tired and disorganized. Mom opened the door before I knocked. She looked older than she had 2 weeks earlier. She reached toward me, but I stepped aside and asked for my documents. Dad stood near the kitchen with crossed arms. Paige sat at the table in sweatpants, her phone face down. Nobody offered a genuine greeting. Mom followed me upstairs and said she wished I had called instead of bringing Evan. I reminded her that I called before Christmas and was told they needed space. She cried and said they only wanted Paige to have one successful night. I asked why her success required pretending I did not exist. Mom said she feared objecting would create an argument. I told her avoiding conflict was still a decision. It simply meant I was chosen to absorb the harm. My documents were inside a plastic container beneath winter blankets. I found my birth certificate, college records, tax forms, photographs, and the recipe box. Nothing appeared missing. When I returned downstairs, Dad said we needed to speak like adults. I told him adults did not lie about canceling Christmas and demand rent money the next morning. He said the party was important to Paige's career and I would have made everyone uncomfortable by questioning expenses. Paige finally looked at me. She claimed it was a business event, not a personal rejection. I placed printed screenshots on the table. One showed her calling the guests the real Christmas crew. Another showed her telling relatives not to invite me. A third showed Dad saying I would get over it. Then I placed the card statement beside them. Paige said she intended to repay the money. I asked why she did not request permission. She said she knew I would refuse. I told her that knowing I would say no proved she understood the money was not hers. Dad accused me of humiliating her. I pointed out that only we and Evan were present. Paige had humiliated herself when she lied about financing the event and attacked an unpaid vendor. Mom asked whether the family could be repaired. I said repair required truth, responsibility, and changed behavior. So far, they had offered tears, excuses, and accusations. None of those were repair. Dad said I acted as though I had never made a mistake. I answered that this was not one mistake. It was a plan built over weeks, supported by 3 people, followed by another demand for money. Before leaving, I looked around the kitchen where our holidays had taken place. I once associated that room with belonging. Now I saw that I had been welcome when I arrived with gifts, paid a bill, or solved a problem. The moment my presence threatened Paige's story, I became disposable. I picked up my container and said, "I am not taking your home, car, or future. I am only taking my name off the bills you chose to create." Paige asked whether I wanted them to suffer. I said I wanted them to become responsible for their lives. Back in Denver, I reviewed 5 years of transfers, payments, invoices, and statements. I had paid $17,400 toward rent shortages, $9,600 toward Paige's vehicle, $6,850 toward medical expenses, $5,300 toward phones and internet, and $6,710 toward groceries, repairs, and emergencies. The total was $45,860. I excluded gifts, meals, and holiday expenses. I prepared a report and mailed it with a certified letter to each of them. I wrote that I was not requesting repayment of the $45,860 because those payments were voluntary. I included the total so they could not pretend my support had been small or occasional. All future financial assistance had ended permanently. Maya's formal request required Paige to repay the $3,460 charged for the party. Future contact would be considered only if it included full responsibility, without blaming me for the consequences. The letters arrived 3 days later. For almost 2 weeks, nobody responded. Then Paige transferred the first payment through Maya's office. She sold a camera lens and 2 designer bags to cover the balance. Her suspended campaign was canceled after the company reviewed her public dispute with the vendor. Unable to manage the vehicle payment, she returned the leased SUV and bought an older car with help from a friend. My parents remained in their rental until the lease ended, then moved into a smaller townhouse. They sold a second television, outdoor furniture, and decorative items they did not need. Their lives did not collapse. They adjusted to an income they had avoided living within. I had not destroyed them. I had stopped protecting them from the mathematics of their choices. The final letter came from Mom. She wrote, "We thought you would always forgive us because you always had." It was the most honest sentence any of them had offered. It confirmed they had mistaken forgiveness for permission. The first months without my family were quieter than expected. At first, the silence felt unnatural. I was used to waking up to requests, reminders, and carefully worded emergencies. Dad needed help until Friday. Mom had found an unexpected charge. Paige needed money to protect an opportunity that would supposedly change her career. When those messages stopped, I sometimes checked my phone from habit. Then I noticed what replaced them. I slept better. I focused longer at work. I stopped calculating how much of each contract would disappear into someone else's crisis. When my Denver lease ended, I moved to a brighter apartment in Lakewood with a separate office and windows facing the foothills. It was not extravagant, but every bill belonged to me, and every object supported the life I wanted, rather than the role my family assigned me. My consulting business grew after I accepted a long-term healthcare client I had previously been too distracted to pursue. I began attending a support group for women carrying financial responsibility for parents, siblings, or partners. The stories differed, but the pattern was familiar. We were praised for being dependable until we said no. Then we were labeled selfish, controlling, or ungrateful. One woman said something I wrote down and kept on my desk. Guilt is not always proof you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is the feeling of breaking an unhealthy rule. My family's rule had been that Claire would fix it. Claire would pay. Claire would forgive. Claire would accept exclusion because she was mature enough to understand. Once I stopped following that rule, everyone who benefited called me cruel. Through the group and counseling, I learned that generosity without boundaries can become enabling. Each time I rescued my family from consequences, I made it easier for them to repeat